Hello again. My name's Charles Sabo, and I'm going to do another teaching video on the book of Isaiah. Today we're going to go into chapter 8. Now, if you saw the teaching video on chapter 7, this is practically a continuation, chapter 8 to chapter 7. And you'll see why as we're going through it, because it refers to the previous. So we're going to go over that. Now, this is coming from the PDF of the Bible commentary on the book of Isaiah that I had published back in January of this year. It actually came on the market. And so I'm going to scroll down through, and you can see this is the PDF, the actual manuscript being used for the commentary. So I'm going to go down to chapter 8. A little too far, huh? Right there. And let's get the beginning. Here we go. And there's chapter 8. Okay, and so if you remember, or if you watched the video of chapter 7, there was a war between Syria, or the Arameans, because Syria, the name Syria didn't exist back then. Assyria did, but these weren't Assyrians. These were Arameans, sons of Aram, who was a son of Noah. Now, this, not son of Noah, son of Shem. Aram. Wait a minute now. Can't remember. Aram was a son of Shem, I believe. Yeah, I believe Aram was a son of Shem. My bad. Now, anyway, this was a war between the northern kingdom of Israel and the Arameans against Judah. And God was warning him not to go to the Assyrians, Assyria, for help. And so he was giving him a vision or a prophecy of a child being born. The child being born has gone into a messianic prophecy as well. It was fulfilled once back during the time of this event, and so it had one fulfillment, and it also was fulfilled by Christ as he came into the world. Now, go to the video, chapter 7, and follow along and read and what have you, and research to where we're coming to verse 1 here, which is, notice it begins with the word moreover. Moreover, the Lord said unto me, now take you a great roll and write in it with a man's pen concerning Maher-shalal-hash-baz. Now, the word moreover is an indicator that this chapter is a continuation from the end of the chapter 7. The Lord commanded Isaiah to take a great roll, which is translated from the Hebrew word gilion, which is defined as tablet made from wood, stone, or metal. Now, he was to write with a man's pen. The man is translated from the Hebrew word enosh and defined as mortal man. So a mortal man's pen on basically a piece of paper of that time. And so it is man is translated from, I already read that. Maher-shalal-hash-baz can be translated into swift is booty, speedy is prey. All right, so this is what that word means, the name, Maher-shalal-hash-baz. Swift is booty, speedy is prey. All right, if you follow chapter 7, they were to be consumed if they go ahead with the Assyrians, and so forth. It's the prophecy against you for not listening to God. Now, if one were to interpret what God had commanded Isaiah to do, then it would be to write on a tablet, most likely paper, within a basic man's mentality. That's what I said by men's pen. Man's mentality. It would be concerning the booty that Assyria would be swiftly gaining from their captivity of Damascus and Samaria. Okay, so the prophecy in the end of chapter 7 talked about these two kings, the king of the Arameans and the king of the northern kingdom, were both going to be taken captive. I believe it was Pekah who was Pekah was captain was head king of northern kingdom, Samaria being the northern kingdom, and Damascus is the Arameans. The Bible wants to call it Syria, which is a poor translation. Yes, the word Syria didn't come into realization or creation until the Seleucids had brought in the name Syria for these people in about the third century BC. Now, the booty swiftly gaining would be the captivity of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians and Damascus and the Arameans. Right? Now, rather than a quick note scratched by an iron stylus on a small wood tablet, Isaiah was to use a normal workman's pen on papyrus paper. Okay, so he's to write it in man's words, though, so that they would understand it. Now this is where it gets very interesting. And I took unto me faithful witness to record Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jaberechiah. Isaiah obeyed God's commands from the law written in Deuteronomy 19:15, where the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall a matter be established. So he took 2 witnesses, right? So, verse 3, and I went unto the prophetess, and she conceived, and bare a son. Then said the Lord to me, call his name Mahershala Hashbaz, right? The name that we were talking about just know that for verse 1. Now the prophetess, well, we'll go over this. The prophetess was also Isaiah's wife, who may have been spoken to by the Lord for this cause. She was a prophetess. The Lord spoke through her also as a prophet. Prophetess. The Lord had brought forth many children to be named concerning his ministry. So this child represented the captivity of Damascus and Samaria, as well as swift booty that Assyria would obtain. Right. So this is Isaiah's son, named Mahershala Hashbaz. Right after, we're talking prophecy concerning a boy that was to be born of a woman or virgin, whatever you want to choose, right? A maiden or virgin. All right. So if you go into chapter 7, you'll see that this prophecy had to happen during Isaiah's time. It had to. That's what it was pertaining to. And I guess I need to go back and show you the verse in chapter 7 that he talks about therefore himself will give you a sign, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Well, the word Alma for virgin also means young woman, right? The prophetess of Isaiah is who qualified also for this. All right. So, and it says, butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse evil and choose good. This is a qualification that this child was to fall into. Jesus fell into this qualification, as well as Hashbaz, whatever his name is. All right. The Lord shall bring upon you and upon your people and upon your father's house days that have not come, from the day of Ephraim departed from Judah, even to the king of Assyria. So the days they've never seen what's coming. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss for the fly of the uttermost part of the rivers, and Egypt for the bee of the land of Assyria. So you can see we're talking the Assyrian captivity here, right? So the child was to be born during the time right before the Assyrian captivity. Okay, so I'm going to go back down. Verse 4 of chapter 8. For before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away before the king of Assyria. Now notice, we were talking about the child being born at the end of, or mid to end of chapter 7, and it had to do with the Assyrian captivity, as you saw those following verses. Here we are right away in chapter 8. It doesn't have to be chapter 8. This all could have been chapter 7 continuing. but it was divided in by chapters, and like I think it was like the 10th century or whatever. Now I didn't put that in here. I probably should have. For before the child shall know knowledge to cry, my father and my mother. Right. So the signs are quite similar between Isaiah 7:16 and Isaiah 8:4. We'll go to 7:16, which I read to you before. 7:16 says, "For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that you abhor shall be forsaken of both her kings." The land of the Arameans, Damascus, and northern kingdom Samaria, forsaken of both kings, forgotten of both kings. Done. The Assyrian captivity. So similar to what is being said here in verse 4. Before the child. Okay, so I'm going to keep reading. John H. Walton does not think that the two time frames can be determined to be the same, which he's wrong when considering the time frame the child matures to be able to choose good over evil, and the time frame that a child comes to speak mama or dada. The conditions depend on the intelligence of the child, because there are case-by-case differences within the population of mankind. There are more intelligent children than others when they're okay. I lean towards the Isaiah child, Maher Shalahazbaz, being the child, the Isaiah 7:16 child, right? Unto you a child should be born of a virgin, well, of a woman, a young woman is what it meant also, right? Isaiah's wife fell into this as per verse 2. Now, or verse 3, I'm sorry. Due to its immediate, where was I? Due to its immediate disclosure that follows chapter 7 in Isaiah 8:1 through 4, right? And so this falls right into it. It could have been part of chapter 7, but the person that did the division of chapters and verses wasn't very good in theology, and he just thought, oh, this is something different here, a different child. It can't be this version because we know it was Christ. Well, no, he was a terrible theologian, and he did not keep these verses, at least 1 through 4, with the previous chapter. Could have made chapter 7 and 8 all one chapter, because they all pertain to that era and that time and that prophecy. All right, now there was only one. There's only. Wait a minute. I lean toward the case even stronger concerning the similarities of signs between them. The similarities in signs are even interesting too. There is only one detail that sways me away from my belief, which is Isaiah never mentioned that his child's mother was called, that the child's mother called the child Emmanuel. That's the only reason I have a little doubt, because Isaiah never mentioned Emmanuel when his child was born, right? They called him something different, but per God's instruction. All right, yet, which made it messianic. God with us, Emmanuel, that made it messianic, but it was still having to do with the child being born during that time. This all happened 7 centuries before Christ. If it were any other woman or child, it would have very little significance within the sign if people were unaware of the woman and the child's existence. So Ahab, is it Ahab? Yeah. The king of Judah, the son of who was going to have a son, Hezekiah. God with us, it could have been, because Hezekiah was very godly. That's so some people think that it was Ahab's son Hezekiah, when actually Ahab doesn't say anything about his wife calling him Emmanuel either. So that objection that I have, or doubt that I have, falls with Ahab as well. So it has to be a child that both Ahab and the leadership of Israel knew about, as well as Isaiah, right? So that whole clique of people should have known about this child, right? So here we are, Isaiah talking about his child being of the same qualifications as what was mentioned in chapter 7. If it were any other woman or child, it would have been very significant, very little significance when the sign of people were unaware of the woman and child's existence. Furthermore, the original Hebrew words for mother and father in 8:4 are modified to say my father and my mother. A toddler would be older to use the possessive words for my within their expressions, right? It's just not a 1-year-old saying mama dada. It has to say my mother, my father. And so at the time that the child's life, they can discern good from evil as well, which can tie in with what was said in Isaiah 7:16. So the child to say my mother, my father falls into the same realm of a child that can discern good from evil, right? Does that make sense? So the qualifications tie together with it being Isaiah's child here in verses 8 1 through 4. All right. With the child able to say my mother and my father and be able to discern good from evil, the age of the child will have to be between 2 and 3 years old. So therefore, this prophecy is to come to pass within 2 to 3 years after the birth of Isaiah's child, Mahershala Bahashbaz, and also named Emmanuel, God with us. So it was a messianic prophecy. I'm never going to say that it's not. It's a double prophecy. It was fulfilled during the time of Ahaz and Isaiah and his wife, the prophetess, and the child was born, and within 2 or 3 years after the child was born, captivity of the Sumerians of northern kingdom by Assyria, as well as Damascus, right, happened, right, within 2 to 3 years of the child being born. That's what this prophecy is about. So we go to verse 5. And the Lord spake with me again, saying, verses 6 through 10 are direct quotes from God to Isaiah and from Isaiah to the people, right? So it's coming out of Isaiah's mouth or on a pen, but it's also straight from the Lord to them, right? For as much as this people refuses the waters of Shiloh that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son. The Assyrian Empire was also centered across another mighty river, the Euphrates. The whole land of Israel simply did not have a river like the Euphrates or the Tigris. God used the difference between the small, humble, yet adequate waters of Israel and the mighty yet uncontrolled rivers of Assyria to make a point. The people rejoice. Remember that they have the Jordan River, which is, very, almost like a creek at times when the water's low, a little creek. And then it becomes a big river during those times where it's flowing heavier. The people rejoice in rebellions and of ungodly behavior. Here God refuses to call Pekah by his name. Pekah acquired his position of king of Israel by usurping authority and slaying King Pekahiah, the son of Menahem. 2 Kings 15:25. All through chapter 7, when referring to Remaliah's son, which was Pekah, he never calls him by the name Pekah. Never. He always says Remaliah's son. What's his name? What's his name? God refuses to acknowledge this king's name because he usurped authority and took the kingdom when he was not authorized to. Okay? So God refuses to call him by name. He's that upset about it, right? Just so you know, if you read through chapter 7, he calls him Remaliah's son through the whole chapter, including here in the beginning of this chapter. So that's why another reason why this is all running together from chapter 7. Now we're going into verse 7. Now therefore, behold, the Lord brings up upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all of his glory, and shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks. God declared that the king of Assyria would overflow his banks in contextual comparison to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In in this case, the river is Assyria, which will overflow its own banks and boundaries in all his glory. The first horn of the captivity, the scattering of God's people, will begin. Zechariah 1:18 through 21. The first horn is the Assyrian king that takes captivity over the northern kingdom. Zechariah 1:18 through 21. Right? So the first scattering of Israel, in this case the northern kingdom. Right? And if you want a breakdown of a little bit more thorough on that, the commentary I wrote on the book of Zechariah is within the book called Joel, Zephaniah, Zechariah, 3 Bible commentaries. You can get a thorough breakdown of Zechariah 1:18 through 21. There's also a YouTube video on chapter 1 if you want to see that. All right. And then verse 8. And he shall pass through Judah, he shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and stretching out his wings shall fill the breadth of the land. O Emmanuel. Look how it's linked with verse 16 of chapter 7. O Emmanuel. Talking about the Assyrian captivity. O Emmanuel. O God with you. The king of Assyria, he will pass through Judah. Right? Remember hearing about that was Hezekiah dealing with it, and then the I think it's, I can't remember, 185,000 dead on the mountain. The Messiah, messenger of the Lord, Messiah, Jesus, struck down 185,000 in the mountains. So Rebekah returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah. We had heard that he had departed from Lachish. That's Isaiah 37:8. Right? So the king of Assyria is going to be going through the land surrounding Judah and destroying, taking people captive all around there. So it's fulfilled by the king of Assyria. He shall pass through Judah. This is what was saying in Isaiah 37:8. There's a history lesson. Isaiah was a historian in chapters 36 through 39. He shall overflow and go, and he shall reach even to the neck, and stretching out his wings shall fill the breadth of the land. O Emmanuel. Links it to chapter 7, doesn't it? The same child as was in chapter 7. So Isaiah's child, I'm very sure it's Isaiah's child that we're talking about in verse 16 of chapter 7. The first fulfillment of that prophecy, the sign that was given to Ahaz. Now, in Isaiah 37, Isaiah wrote as a historian and presented the current events of what had happened in that time. Sennacherib, king of Assyria, sent Rebekah to Jerusalem and to be his representative while he was waiting in Lachish. Sennacherib had decided to go after the suburbs of Judah. Now, so this is all the Assyrian king is about Sennacherib, King Sennacherib of Assyria. Right? And he shall pass through Judah. Right? Where it says here in this verse, verse 8. All right. Sennacherib shall overflow and reach even to the neck. When a person is being flooded with water, they can't stand up until it comes over their head. So in this case, it comes up to the neck. Judah withstood the flood of God. That flood, and God stepped in and supernaturally protected Jerusalem up to the neck. We're surrounded. They took everything else around us, but we're up to our neck here. We're right here at the walls of Jerusalem. Right? So this is a fulfillment that happens chapters 36 through 37 and 38. The final expression of verse 8 confirms and ties in the connection between the two names of the child being born within this prophecy. Right? The prophecy would be fulfilled, and God confirms it was the expression, confirms it with the expression, O Emmanuel. Maher Shalahashbaz, swift booty is speedy as prey, is Emmanuel. All right? There's no other way around it. This verse, these right here, confirms these. We're talking about the same child in chapter 7, verse 16. And I'll go back to 7:16 because some of you maybe have never read that. Actually, it's 7:14. Did I get that wrong? Therefore, the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. The controversial aspect within verse 14 is the Hebrew word alma, which can also be interpreted as a young woman instead of virgin. The reality of the Hebrew word is that it was given within a verbless clause, which implied that the virgin is with child, instead of assumed to have a child or will conceive in the future. The arguments spend time and energy attempting to prove the passage to have intended this to be a young woman rather than a virgin who had never known a man. Isaiah had provided Ahaz a sign which had been given to provide a fulfillment within Ahaz's time. As stated in verse 16, the land that you abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. The land he abhors are the land of the Arameans, Damascus, and Samaria, the northern kingdom, because they were surrounding him. They were attacking him. He needed help. God's trying to tell him, don't go to Assyria, because they're going to take the northern kingdom and Damascus captivity. And he's giving the prophecy of it. In order to allow it to come to pass, one needs to look at Messiah being the one being born during this time frame. One needs to not look. Okay, don't look at this as being messianic yet. That verse is messianic, but this prophecy has to do with the time during the time of King Ahaz and Isaiah. It was a child being born during the time frame of the Syro-Ephraimite war. The unknown is then who was the young woman and who was the boy being born. Some want to say that Ahaz was to be the father of that his son Hezekiah was a child being born. There are also many that like the thought that Isaiah's wife, stated in Isaiah 8:1-3, would be the young woman who gave birth to Maher-Shalal-Baz. Isaiah states in 8:18 that all the children that the Lord gives him are for signs. Wasn't this supposed to be a sign? Wasn't this supposed to be a sign? See how it ties together with Isaiah's son, right? So, we're going to go back down where we were. So you can see, if you go through chapter 7 thoroughly, you'll go to my video in chapter 7 too, so that way you can understand this a little better. Associate yourselves, O you people, and you shall be broken in pieces, and give ear, all you of far countries. Gird yourselves, and you shall be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, and you shall be broken in pieces. So, as Syria, Aramea, Israel, Judah would prepare for the coming invasion, God would break them in pieces, no matter how much they prepared themselves. O ye far countries refers to the surrounding countries that God was ready to pour his wrath upon. These were the Arameans, the Phoenicians, the Philistines, the Neo-Hittites, the Edomites, the Persians, the Medes, and the Manaeans, penetrating as far as the Caspian Sea. Sennacherib, king of Assyria, also invaded the subjugated Babylonia. Okay? Now, verse 10. Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us. This verse has been misinterpreted by some. God is still indicating to the above countries that no matter how much they prepare, even taking counsel or alliance together, they will not stand against Assyria. For God is with us does not reveal God is with Israel, but that God is with Assyria. O Emmanuel, God with us. Emmanuel means God with us, right? For God is with us. To take counsel together, and shall come to naught. Speak the word, and shall not stand, for God is with us. O Emmanuel. For God is with us does not reveal God is with Israel, but that God is with Assyria. When Rabshakeh first spoke in behalf of Sennacherib, he said, "And I am now come up without the Lord against the land to destroy it. The Lord said unto me, Go up against the land and destroy it." So he said he's there without the Lord, so he's going to do it himself, speaking on Sennacherib's behalf. But the Lord's the one that commanded them to take it, right? So the Lord was with Assyria instead of Emmanuel, God with us, for Israel. God is with us is for the Assyrians and their conquest. So the first fulfillment of Isaiah 7:14, Emmanuel, a child shall be born, his name shall be Emmanuel, and then what's his name? I have to read it. Maher-shalal-Hash-Baz, Isaiah's son, born of the prophetess, is called Emmanuel, God with us, because he's with speedy booty, or whatever it means there, swift booty. God with us. Who's getting booty? Assyria. So, O Emmanuel, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over. He shall reach even to the neck, and stretching out his wings shall fill the breadth of your land. O Emmanuel, God with us. Assyria. God's with Assyria. Right? He sent them. He sent them. Verse 11. For the Lord spake thus to me with a strong hand, and instructed me that I should not walk in the way of this people, saying. Now, Isaiah spoke for himself concerning what the Lord had advised him what not to do concerning the people whom he dwelt with. God is once again quoted by Isaiah within verses 12 through 16. All right. So, say you not, O confederacy, to all them to whom this people shall say, O confederacy, neither fear you their fear, nor be afraid. Within this verse, a confederacy stands out as the word that needs to be defined. The Hebrew word is kesher, which is defined as conspiracy or treason. God prepared Isaiah for accusations towards him from the people when he was to break the bad news to them about the Assyrian invasion to come. They were going to accuse him of treason or as one who was starting a conspiracy against them. God assured Isaiah to not be afraid, because with God on your side, who can be against you? Romans 8:31, right? So if God's on Isaiah's side, don't be afraid, right? That's what God's telling him here. The Lord of hosts himself, let him be your fear and let him be your dread. God assured Isaiah that he is the only one to fear. Okay, and then Proverbs 9:10 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding, right? So God's advising Isaiah, sanctify the Lord, lift him up, separate the Lord, lift him up of the hosts of himself, and let him be your fear, right? And let him be your dread, right? He's also supposed to be telling this to the people of Judah, that trust in the Lord, fear the Lord, don't fear the Assyrians, because he's going to tell them, don't fear the Assyrians when they surround Jerusalem. They're going to take the lands around Judah, around Jerusalem, but not Jerusalem. And he's telling Jerusalem, don't fear, the Lord is with you. All right? Now, verse 14. And he shall be for a sanctuary, but for a stone of the stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, for a gin and for a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Now, ironically, he in verse 14 refers back to the Lord. In verse 13, the Lord in the beginning of verse 14 is referring to Isaiah. God will be Isaiah's sanctuary during the accusations of rebellion against him. Then a new sentence is started with what will happen to those who do not listen to Isaiah, as he speaks the word from the Lord. God will be their stone of stumbling and what offends them. He will be a gin, or in the Hebrew word pak, which is a spring net. He will be a snare, or Hebrew word malkesh, which is defined as bait or lure. He will lure Jerusalem into a spring net, right? All right, now verse 15. As many among them shall stumble and shall fall and be broken and be snared and be taken, right? Now, within a positive note, God will lure many of them into captivity. But with the word many, a person can conclude not all will be taken captive, right? We're talking Judah now. So he's prophesying of the Babylonian captivity. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. This verse is connected to the previous verse. The ones not taken into captivity or killed going into captivity shall strengthen themselves in the law and God's testimonies. Looking at the scriptures, Daniel and others were taken into captivity, but listened to what was written by Isaiah and were strong in the word of the Lord. If you know about Daniel and the people with Daniel, they were strong in the word. They had strong faith. So this warning from Isaiah meant something to them. Verse 17, and I will wait upon the Lord that hides his face from the house of Jacob, and I will look for him. Isaiah proclaimed his own faith while his people are to be taken into captivity. Notice he uses the house of Jacob and not the house of Israel. Jacob was an ungodly man, a deceiver, a trickster, or what have you, until he wrestled with the Lord in the desert, and the Lord snapped his hip or whatever, and then he called him Israel, the believer. So these are the non-believers. The house of Jacob are non-believers. Okay? Verse 18, behold, I and the children whom the Lord hath given me are for signs and for wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts, which dwells in the Mount Zion. From verse 16, Isaiah confirms that a remnant will be like him, and they will be witnesses to others concerning the word of God. The best way to understand this is to keep reading the Old Testament concerning Israel during the captivity. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that's Daniel 1:6, are prime examples of the remnant, as well as Nehemiah, Ezra, Esther, and Mordecai. The signs and wonders did happen during the captivity. The witness of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah revealed the supernatural. Daniel knew the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar and the interpretations. Daniel 2. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah survived the fiery furnace in Babylon, which was another supernatural event. Daniel 3. Okay, so they experienced the supernatural, right? Behold, I and the children from the Lord be given me as for signs and for wonders in Israel, for the Lord of hosts, which dwell in the Mount Zion. So, signs and wonders coming, including the destruction of the 185,000 in the mountains, was a sign and wonder. It's an amazing story. Isaiah covers a lot of interesting stuff here in this book, in the whole commentary that I've written. I've broken it down. All right, verse 19. And when they shall say unto you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, shall not a people seek their God, for the living to the dead? Because the living to the dead. All right, Isaiah warned the children of Israel to not be tempted to seek the mediums who claim to talk to the dead for help. It is something that the Lord warned about in Deuteronomy 18:11. The demonic realm is not far away from those who seek it. The mediums and wizards seek the dead, when in reality the dead are not available to talk to them. Who is it that answers them? Right? What's the question? It is none other than the demonic realm, who jump at the opportunity to deceive the living. Today we know seeking the dead is wrong because of what God has said in Luke 16:19 through 31 concerning the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man went immediately to Sheol, hell, while Lazarus went immediately to Abraham's bosom. In both cases they were not available to be spoken to from the living. The Jews should have known this from the mistake King Saul made before he died. 1 Samuel 28:7 through 20. Right? Which is before this time, right? It happened. So 1 Samuel 28:7 through 20 shows how Saul tried seeking the dead, tried seeking Samuel to talk to him, and that was a mistake. Saul sought out to speak to Samuel after Samuel's death for advice concerning the next day battle against the Philistines. The Lord was not responding to him, so Saul resorted to a pagan practice, which he knew was wrong, as per Deuteronomy 18:11. Saul was cursed for his disobedience of the Lord's commandments, 1 Chronicles 10:13. He failed to trust and obey the word of God. Leviticus 19:31. Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Right? He was in total disobedience to the word. So he was killed in that battle, by the way, as per what Samuel told him. Verse 20. To the law and to the testimony, if you speak not according to this word, is because there is no light in them. This verse warned the Jews to judge people by their fruit, as we're told to as Christians. Jesus warned his disciples to judge those among them for their fruit. I already said that. Oh, I see. I'm repeating myself. Matthew 7:19 through 20. Every tree that brings not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast in the fire. Wherefore by your fruits you shall know them. The children of Israel spoke against the testimony of the law, which convicted them of sin, but instead went after mediums and wizards in their order to speak to the dead. There was no light in them. If they went to the mediums, they were not children of the light, they were children of darkness. Verse 21. And they shall pass through it, hardly bestead and hungry, and it shall come to pass that when they shall be hungry, they shall fret themselves, curse their king and their God, and look upward. The Lord proclaimed that those who survive this scarcity of food will eventually be hungry. They will look up at God and curse at their king and curse at the Lord because of their hunger. The God whom they had forgotten during the times of comfort is the blame during the times of suffering. That's all too familiar even in our times. Oh, these people that call themselves Christians because they're living in lives of luxury. Oh, look what God's given me. And then they start going through trials and they curse God. I go through trials every day and I ask God why, but I don't curse God. I just ask him why. Help me understand. And that's faithfulness. I have faith that he's in control, and I will keep going while he's in control until he takes me out of here. Verse 22. And they shall look unto the earth, and behold trouble and darkness, dimness of and anguish, and they shall be driven to darkness, because they had been rejected by God, because they rejected God first, because the people would seek the dark, evil realm. They had fallen into paganism, sought familiar spirits, and worshipped other gods. The people would be given over to a reprobate mind. I'll give you Romans 1:28. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. All right, homosexuality for one. If you continue reading Romans 1:29 through 32, you will find the exact things that God handed them over to. He still hands people over to those same things even today. All right, so he hands those people even over today to this stuff. Those that don't seek the Lord. And that's the completion of chapter 8. So you can see, in a nutshell, this is about a child being born that whose name is interpreted as swift booty. And then talks about the Assyrian king coming in and taking the swift booty. And the warning, O Emmanuel, is God with us? It means God was with the Assyrian king who was taking swift booty. And so if you go to Isaiah 7:14, therefore the Lord shall give you a sign. Behold, a young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us. All right. So, butter and honey shall he eat, and he may refuse evil and choose good. Jesus fell into that. It's messianic. But this has to do with a child born during this time. And for before the child shall know to refuse evil and choose the good, the land that abhors shall be forsaken of both her kings. What land? Well, if you read through the first 13 verses, we're talking about the Arameans, Damascus, and the northern kingdom, Samaria, were going to be taken captive. Are going to be destroyed. Well, then we talk about the sign in 7:14, which correlates with Isaiah 8:1 through 3 about the son right here, Maher-Lashalazbaz. The word moreover means is a continuation from what he was talking about in chapter 7, right? And his name means swift booty, Swift as booty, speedy as prey. And then, oh, Emmanuel links all of this to 7:14, right? So, interesting. Theologians misinterpret this. Theologians misinterpret this. That's all I'll say. This is what God has given me, that chapter 8 and chapter 7 should be read together as a set. They are linked to, they should not have been separated. If they wouldn't have been separated, people would be reading Maharashabhas, whatever, as the child in 7:14, right? Because the standards, or the prophecy of what he was to be and what he was to do and what have you, that he was to be, before he could say mama and dada, my mama and my dada. To say my mama and my dada, you got to be 2 or 3 years old, right? To be able to discern good or evil, you have to be 2 or 3 years old. Same age frame, right? And before the child says my mama and my dada, the kingdoms will fall. Correlates with what he was saying in verses 15 and 16 of chapter 7. So this is an interesting chapter to link to chapter 7, and that's how it should be interpreted. There's no, oh no, I don't agree with it, it really is Hezekiah. Well, if it was Hezekiah, then it had nothing to do with him being born. I guess it could be. If you want to say it's Hezekiah, Hezekiah would have had to have been born 2 to 3 years before the Assyrian captivity of the northern kingdom, Samaria, and Damascus, right? And that's possible. It's possible that it was Hezekiah. But why would he go immediately into chapter 8 talking about Isaiah's son if it wasn't Isaiah's son, right? And linking it, Isaiah's son, O Emmanuel, to 7:14 Emmanuel. There's your clue. So you can't say it's Hezekiah, because it's talking about Isaiah's son, and Isaiah's son everyone knew about. Oh, this is the guy. This is the son that the prophecy was about. Ooh, it's getting ready to happen. So that's the way it's broken down. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like down below. Please subscribe to my channel, and ask questions if you have them in the comment section. Until the next time, chapter 9, may the Lord be with you. God bless you.